Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X Factor number 70, cover dated September 1991. And this is just a stunning cover by Mike Mignola. This one I bought off the newsstand solely on the basis of the cover. And it's a pity that he doesn't do the interior art. It was around this time too that he collaborated with Walt Simonson on a solo Wolverine adventure. That's a pretty excellent comic as well, and you can see all the strengths of Mignola's art on this cover in terms of composition, in terms of spotting blacks, in terms of the statuesque nature of the characters. They look like they're hewn out of granite or marble, but I really like the effect. And it is a suitably elegiac looking composition with the cover caption Day of Decision, as Professor X is faced with the question of what's to become of 14 X-Men on Muir Isle. So this is an epilogue to the Muir Island saga. And just before I open up the comic, one last thing to note: this is the last time that we see the original 5 X-Men as X Factor and Jean and Cyclops in their X Factor uniforms, and the Whilce Portacio corner box as well, because the very next issue, 71, features the new X Factor with Guido and Lorna Dane and Havoc and the others. So let's open this one up to the splash page here. We've got Professor X in his suit, shouting the code name for his son, not David. That's what I thought was a bit weird about it, rereading it this time round. And the issue itself, its creators are Peter David, who's the new writer, Kirk Jarvinen, guest penciler, Joe Rubinstein, guest inker, Michael Heisler letter, and Glynis Oliver and Steve Buccellato colorists. So let's continue with this. I like these opening couple of pages here where we have the 6-panel grid, classic 6-panel grid here, but one of them is open border here. And we have the title of the issue, Ends and Odds, rather than Odds and Ends. So, and some nice use of duo shade here as well by Jarvinen and Rubinstein. And we have Professor X, it turns out, in the astral plane, and he is looking to see if he can find his son on the astral plane, because at the end of Uncanny X-Men 280, when the Shadow King was destroyed, David Haller's mind winked out of existence too, it seemed. So here's Professor X on this astral manifestation of a phone, calling his son and getting the automated message, please leave a message and we'll get back to you. So in the physical world, Professor X is in bed. This is a bit odd as well, an odd decision. He's in bed beside his son David, or Legion, and is being attended to by Moira and also by Scott, Jean and Storm. And there comes in to the hospital room or the medical center Wolverine smoking a cigarette. And I'm just struck by the composition here, or rather more particularly the style by which Wolverine is drawn. Very reminiscent of Art Adams' version of Wolverine here. And what happens is Moira upbraids him for smoking, and look at this, completely macho. He flips the cigarette into his mouth and puts it out by swallowing it. So then he says to Jubilee that he wants to have a chat with her. That'll get picked up on later in the issue. And then we have this little exchange here regarding Scott's attitude to Wolverine. They have an old rivalry and tense relationship going back to the Byrne Claremont days and Cockrum days on the title. And Moira points out that the tension may be because that Wolverine views Scott as a rival. A rival as leader of the X-Men? No. A rival for Jean, yes. And over the page again, we've got a nice anchor image here of Warren, Archangel, flying above the now devastated Moir. But this is an interesting choice here, that the Institute itself is not destroyed, whereas it seemed to me from X-Factor 69 and Uncanny X-Men 270 that the Institute, the Overground Institute, had been destroyed. So this is a little bit of a surprise to me to see it here, but the shape of the island has been changed, and Warren notes that from his bird's eye view. We also see there are other little groups of people on the island, and throughout the issue we check in with them and what's going on with them. So we've got Wolverine and Jubilee here, we've got Lorna Dane, Polaris and Guido, we've got Rogue, and then we've got Colossus here, who's calling out to Warren using his old codename Angel rather than Archangel, but Warren is out of earshot. And then we have this interesting moment when Beast starts quoting W.B. Yeats's poem, The Second Coming, turning and turning in the widening jar. The falcon cannot hear the falconer, things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed time, now that's an error, it should be tide. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And interesting, just the image connected with that particular line, which is a smashed photograph from Professor X to Moira, for Moira Love Charles, and a reference to their former love affair, though they're no longer lovers. Just interesting juxtaposition of Beast's quotation and that particular image and its reference to the former romantic relationship between Professor X and Moira. And then we have this little kind of conversation between Beast and Colossus regarding who is the poet behind the poem, but Beast makes it plain it's William Yeats, and he explains it. What does it all mean, asks Colossus, and Beast says it means that all teams with an X preceding their names better get their act together fast. So this is all in preparation for the new teams, X-Men Blue and Gold and the new X-Factor. And then we get a reflection on the devastation caused by the battle with the Shadow King, and a little joke here in terms of whether Forge can whip up a gizmo to do the cleanup, and Forge just gives Colossus a broom and pan. So of course Peter David, renowned for his sense of humor on the books. And I like this issue by Peter David because he delves into not just dangling threads of the plot from the previous 4 issues of the storyline, which were in some cases quite rushed, some of that because of Claremont's abrupt departure, but also not only just dealing with dangling plot lines, but also character moments as well, which is what we get here when Professor X in the astral plane is going after his son David, because in Uncanny X-Men 280 he noted that there never was time for David. So Peter David is picking up on that and exploring it here in this issue. And then we get one of these explanations where Mystique comes up to Rogue, and Rogue is upset at the fact that she believed that Mystique was dead, going all the way back to Uncanny X-Men 265, when it seemed like Val Cooper had shot Mystique. And we get the explanation that Val resisted the Shadow King's influence, that she brought the gun to her own head, pulled the trigger, and the gun jammed. Or rather, it didn't. It fired, but the barrel jerked and the bullet creased her skull. Also, Nick Fury's present, and Nick was involved in a plot to hypnotize Mystique so that she would believe that she was Val. She would take on Val's form using her mutant power, but that she would be hypnotized to believe she was Val, so the Shadow King, Jacob Reeves, wouldn't twig to the fact that she was a plant. And then there was a trigger word for bringing her out of the hypnosis, and that word was Rogue. So this prompts a heart-to-heart between Rogue and Mystique, and Rogue upbraids Mystique for letting her believe that she was dead, that she saw on TV. She saw them load your body on the meat wagon, and Mystique says, it wasn't me, it could have been, you could have told me, found a way, had Fury tell me, dropped me a postcard, something. Of course, Mystique shoots back at her, the X-Men were believed dead, and you didn't let me know immediately that you were all right. And Rogue says that was different. So anyway, they hug and make up. And of course, in the background was always the question as regards what was the nature of Mystique's relationship to Rogue. Was she her mother? She was her foster mother officially, but was she actually also her biological mother? And then we have the upshot of Wolverine and Jubilee's chat, and Jubilee's not very pleased, but it's not made explicit what Wolverine said to her. So Jubilee says, forget it, I won't. We're a team like Batman and Robin, Siegfried and Roy, so on and so forth. So just you drop it. And then Wolverine concludes here, she took that better than I thought she would. So what was it that he was saying to her? Presumably something about the fact that she couldn't be part of the adult X-Men teams, Blue and Gold, and or maybe there was some kind of suggestion that she should be part of a new iteration of the New Mutants. Of course, some of the old New Mutants, so to speak, were at this point part of X-Force under Cable's leadership. But perhaps there was ideas for another school for younger mutants, since Professor X is coming back now to the X-Mansion and the heart of the X-Men mythos. And then we've got a little comic scene here between Guido and Lorna Dane, and what we learn here is that since Lorna was freed from imprisonment by the Shadow King, her old powers, her control over the force of magnetism has returned, and she's also lost her size and muscles and strength, the physical transformation she underwent, going all the way back to issue 251, issue 250 of the series of Uncanny X-Men, that is. And we've got this little comic scene where she's complaining about how stiff she is, and Guido instructs her to take a real deep breath while thrusting your hips back. Okay, but what good is this supposed to do me? You nothing, doing wonders for me though, as he takes a look at, well, you can see where. So let's see. And then she slaps him, and then arrives Val Cooper. Now this is our setup for what would be the very next issue of X-Factor, where Val invites them to join Freedom Force, and how Lorna is skeptical and says there's no way I'm getting involved with a group that had the Blob and those guys as members. And Val says the name isn't important, the concept is. And so they do change the name, but they stick with the concept of superpowered mutants acting as an agency of the US government. And then we check back with Professor X in the astral plane, and he's making his way to this top of this staircase and leaps over the gap into this house where all the lights are on, where there's a picture of Legion on the wall with crossbones. And what does it all mean? Well, Jean arrives on the astral plane and tells Professor X that David is gone. She explains to him, Professor, think of the images, a few bricks shy, staircase not going all the way to the top. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Images created by David's mind, he's calling to me, says Professor X. No, Professor, images from your own mind, from your subconscious, telling you what your conscious mind won't accept. David is gone. There's nothing here. No matter how powerful a telepath you are, you can't work with emptiness. So this is Professor X feeling guilty, of course, about how he was never there for his son, not properly speaking. And then the other original students, the original X-Men join, And this is a nice image here by Jarvinen, where Bobby is forming this little X with his with these snowballs, and everybody's forming X's, yes, and it's all anticipatory of the big changes coming in October. And then Professor X decides to wake up. Scott gives him the news that he'll never walk again. And Professor X says, "I don't believe in never, Scott, and furthermore, I never have." So then we have this more proper reunion between the awake professor and his original students. And he says to Moira, he's all right. And then we get this little jokey bit from Peter David where she says to Storm, who passes it on to Colossus, that he's all right, all the way to Gambit's there having a smoke despite the no smoking sign. This is a strange kind of sinister bit from Gambit where he startles Lorna regarding he's being all right. So this kind of telephone, Chinese telephone of messages goes all the way out of the Institute, out to Rogue, to Wolverine, and Wolverine asks, "That's nice, who, Charlie or Legion?" And Rogue realizes she forgot to ask. And then we get this somber moment where Professor X closes his son's eyes rather. And what then is the situation with Legion, with David? He's comatose and seems to be completely without a mind, physically alive but dead, psychically. So it's unclear what happens him after this. Is he going to be, because the gesture of closing his eyes is what one does when someone is dead? Are we supposed to believe that he's going to be buried or what? But Professor X asks to be brought to the window, and outside he sees all the X-Men and some members. Well, these are all the X-Men at this point, and also Guido here. And Professor X asks the question, what am I going to do with 14 X-Men? And Hank's response is, bag 'em. So there we go. And here, the letters page, next issue, a new beginning. So a new beginning for X Factor. The Peter David, Larry Stroman soft reboot, or well, it's pretty much maybe even a hard reboot because it's an all new team. And then our original X-Men getting split between the blue and gold teams. And coming shortly will be my reviews of Uncanny X-Men 281 forward, the first few issues of the gold team. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video concerning X Factor number 70, the Muir Island Saga Epilogue. If you did, please like the video, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.